Imagine a huge, bustling capital city deciding to completely flip the script on its energy, its transport, and even its trash. Well, that's exactly what we're digging into today. We're looking at Tshwane, South Africa's capital, which has this incredibly ambitious plan to become totally net zero carbon by 2050. So let's break down how they think they can actually pull this off. But you gotta ask, right? Is that even possible? I mean, think about the sheer scale of it all. The power grid, the millions of cars, all the industry. Can a city this big really, truly wipe out its carbon footprint? Or is this just a nice idea that's, basically impossible? Well, Shwani is betting that it's not a dream at all. They actually have a formal council-approved climate action plan that's meant to be their roadmap. So let's unpack it, and we'll start with the very core of the challenge they're up against. Okay, so before we jump into the how, we really need to get clear on the what and the why. What does net zero even mean? And what are the stakes here that are driving such a massive change? So, the main idea here isn't to just magically stop every single emission overnight. It's really about finding a balance. Think of it like a bathtub. The city is trying to turn the emissions tap way, way down, while at the same time opening up the drain, things like forests that literally pull carbon out of the air. When what's going in equals what's coming out, bingo, you've hit net zero. And, Tshwane isn't just pulling this out of thin air. This whole plan is designed to line up with global targets, like the ones from the Paris Agreement. It's also following some pretty urgent advice from the IPCC. That's the UN's big group for climate science, which says we basically have to hit net zero by 2050 to avoid the worst of climate change. And for the city itself, this is all about future-proofing. It's about building resilience for whatever comes next. All right, to tackle a problem this huge, you've got to know exactly what you're dealing with. So the city did this super deep dive to pinpoint where all its greenhouse gas emissions are coming from. And honestly, the results are pretty eye-opening. And here it is, the breakdown. You can see the city's entire carbon footprint really boils down to just 3 main areas. But look at that, one of them is just massive. A whopping 61% comes from something called stationary energy. Let's take a look at what that actually is. So that giant 61%, it's basically all the energy used to keep the city running. We're talking about the electricity and fuel that power everything from huge office buildings and factories to our own homes and construction sites. This is, without a doubt, the #1 target. Next up, coming in at 21%, is transport. This is the daily hum of the city, all the cars, buses, and trucks moving people and stuff around. Because the city is so spread out and really relies on roads, all that fuel burned by commuters and buses adds up to a pretty big slice of the pie. And finally, at 18%, we've got waste. Now, this one might surprise you, but when stuff like food scraps gets buried in a landfill, it rots and releases methane, which is a really powerful greenhouse gas. So the fact that Tshwane sends most of its waste to landfills makes this a major problem spot they have to fix. Okay, so the problem is crystal clear. Now let's get to the good part, the solution. The city has laid out this 4-part action plan that goes after each one of those problem areas directly. This is their blueprint for building that net zero future. This timeline really shows that this is a marathon, not a sprint. The plan sets these clear, step-by-step targets, a 15% cut by 2030, then a 45% cut by 2040, all leading up to that final goal of 100% or net zero by 2050. It's this phased approach that makes a huge task start to feel, achievable. And here they are, the 4 pillars holding up the entire strategy. And if you look closely, you'll notice each one is a direct answer to those emission sources we just talked about. Reinventing energy, greening transport, net zero buildings, and a zero-waste economy. Let's look at each one. First up is the biggest piece of the puzzle, energy. The goal here is a total game changer. Get at least 80% of all electricity from renewables. How? By bringing in big solar and wind farms from independent companies, and even looking at how the city's old power plants can be flipped for a clean energy future. Let's just pause on that number for a second. 80%. That is not some small tweak. That is a complete rewiring of how the city gets its power, shifting from fossil fuels to a grid that runs mostly on clean energy. This one move has the biggest impact of the entire plan. Pillar number 2 is all about transport. The main play here is going electric. And the city is trying to lead by example, with a goal to make its entire bus fleet, all 100% of it, electric by 2050. But it's not just about fancy new buses. The plan also pushes for better infrastructure for walking and cycling to get more people to leave their cars at home. Now, Pillar 3 brings us right back to that huge stationary energy problem. The goal is to make every single building, public or private, net zero carbon. That means they'll have to be super energy efficient and run on renewable power. And the way they'll make this happen is with the city's green building bylaw, which gives them the power to enforce new standards. And the final pillar is about completely reimagining what we do with our waste. The goal is to stop burying our problems in the ground. By diverting 100% of waste from landfills, the city wants to create what's called a circular economy, where things are reused and recycled instead of just tossed. They'll even capture gas from wastewater to create clean energy, turning waste into a resource. And there's that number again, and it's absolute 100%. This isn't just about getting better at recycling, this is about a future with no new landfills at all. It means a complete shift in how an entire city thinks about stuff, from a throwaway mindset to one that's truly circular. Okay, but let's be real. A plan this big is pretty much worthless if it just sits on a shelf collecting dust. So how is Tshwane actually going to turn these goals into reality? Well, the last part of their strategy is all about the machinery they're building to drive this change. So this is the engine room. They're setting up a special sustainability unit to oversee the whole thing. They're creating a climate fund to attract green investment. They're even going to use the city's own buying power to support sustainable businesses. And that green building bylaw, that gives them the legal teeth to actually enforce these changes. This whole framework is designed to turn ambition into action. And this quote from the plan itself really sums up the whole vision. It's not just about hitting a carbon number on a chart. It's about fundamentally changing the city into a place that's safer, healthier, and way more prepared for the future. It's really a vision of resilience. So when you boil it all down, this isn't just some vague promise. It's a really comprehensive game plan that connects a huge global problem to concrete local action. For every major source of emissions, from the power plant all the way to the garbage truck, there is a targeted solution. The roadmap from here to 2050 is on the table. And that leaves us with one final and maybe the most important question. We've seen the high-level plan, the targets, the strategies, but what does this all actually look like on the ground? How will a net zero future actually change the daily lives of people living in Tshwane and maybe in our own cities too? That's the real thing to think about. Thanks for tuning into this explainer.